Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode here of the Lonely Wrist Podcast. I am your host, as always, Blake Ray. And we've had a lot of incredible watch brands on the show, heritage brands, micro brands, innovators, entrepreneurs. But today's guest actually brings us something truly special. This is not just another watch brand. Today, we actually have an American story. My guest today is Joseph, the third generation president and CEO of Hampden Watch, the oldest continuously operating family run watch company in the United States. Founded in Chicago in 1922, Hampden has survived the Great Depression, World War II, and the quartz revolution. And today, under Joe's leadership, it is entering the second century stronger than ever. Joe's background is quite fascinating. Before joining the family business in the 80s, he actually worked in Silicon Valley as a computer engineer and has since taken the helm in 2002. He reinvented the brand from the ground up, blending Swiss precision with Chicago soul and pioneering personalization through innovations such as the patented case cap system, which turns every watch into a storytelling canvas. And beyond the history, this is a family-run business. Joe is now working alongside his son, Dan, and carrying 4 generations of legacy of American watchmaking forward into modern age. Genuinely excited to welcome him to talk about the family, the brand. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Well, thank you, Blake. That was a very kind introduction. And I'm really excited to be able to talk with you.
Yeah, no, this is an exceptional. I had never heard of your brand. All honesty, I'd never heard of your brand until you guys have reached out. There's so many great brands out there that just get overlooked, which is crazy considering you guys have really been around since the early, like 1920s.
Well, yeah, there may be a reason that we escaped your notice, because we actually have a bit of a complicated history, both our brand history and a really interesting backstory, family backstory. My grandfather started Clinton Watch Company in Chicago in 1922. And he was one of 5 brothers and a brother-in-law who all started watch companies in North America. The first, it's the story you've heard so many times. The eldest brother came to New York, started a watch company, then started bringing the family over one at a time. Another brother with him in New York. Then he sent a brother and a brother-in-law to Canada, and they started Cardinal Watch, which was a brand for many, many decades in Canada, and Marathon, who's of course still around, a marvelous brand. And my grandfather, Hyman Wein, he sent to Chicago. And then the final brother went to Geneva, Switzerland, Manya Weinseer, and then they changed their name to Vancier. They Francified their name. So after all of these watch companies we were a watch group before there was a word for it, and 2 of us are still around after all this time.
I'm curious, and this is probably a little off the beating trail of our normal questions, but how does it feel like to lead the oldest continuous American family-owned watch brand in America?
It's funny because I've been asked that before, and I like to joke that all the smart people got out of the watch business in the 80s and 90s, right? So it's a distinction, but we struggled obviously through some complications. My grandfather started Clinton in 1922, and then he started the Wolbrook brand in 1949 and the Douglas brand in 1955, and he acquired the Hampden brand in 1958, which is a whole other story. Maybe we'll get there. And those were the brands that I grew up with. I remember them all as a kid, and I remember my father the different brands were used for different channels of distribution. And my father acquired Benrus in 1981. And by then, Benrus was no longer a jewelry store brand. It had been pushed into mass merchants. And it was, there were several Americana brands that were all in this space. We were selling Montgomery Ward and Kmart and Walmart and Sears and all these, J.C. Penney, and we were competing with Elgin and Waltham and Gruen and these other brands that had, all gotten into trouble and changed hands. And in the late 90s, so, we were little companies selling J.C. Penney or selling Walmart. And they really were pressuring the companies, right? The brands. And so there was a consolidation that went on, and you ended up having all of the companies at one point rolled up into one owner. And we ended up selling our brand at the end of the 90s to somebody who then had a whole collection of brands, and it was easier for him to to push back against these huge retailers.
Right.
And so after we sold that, the only brands we had left were Hampden and Clinton.
Got it. Yeah. And explain the thought process of Benrus, right? Marathon. Wolbrook, Douglas, like those are great brands, what was the strategy at the time to kind of divest themselves from some of your portfolio?
So some of this I can only speak secondhand, things that my father told me
Sure.
as I was either growing up or coming into the business. But the Wolbrook and Douglas brands, along with Hampden, were for us subsidiary brands to Clinton. Clinton was our best brand at the time.
Right.
And of course, when we acquired Benrus, that was a much better known brand. And my father let the Wolbrook and Douglas trademarks expire. And both of them, interestingly, have been resurrected in the last half a dozen years by a French company, because they discovered this interesting and unexpected brush with history. Do you know about this?
I do. I have multiple Walbrook and Douglas watches in my portfolio. So technically I have Hamptons and Clintons and your family brands.
So if they're not in the last half a dozen years, they were made by us. It came out that Neil Armstrong had owned a Douglas watch when he was a test pilot before, and we didn't know this at the time. How could we? We sold inexpensive Douglas divers watches to PXs. At the time he was a military pilot, probably didn't make a ton of money, and so it makes complete sense that he would have bought a Douglas watch. We just didn't know it at the time. So anyway, I wish them tons of luck in building building those brands back up.
Yeah, let's talk about your grandfather Hyman and his brothers. Between, it seems like the 1910s to 1930s, you guys founded several brands.
Yes.
Tell us about the portfolio of that era.
So the eldest brother in New York started Weinstrom Watch, and along is Alex Wein, and his brother Manya was in Geneva and had registered the Abra brand, and so Weinstrom Watch was actually importing Abra Swiss watches and selling them, actually Manya, the Swiss brother, worked with all of the other brothers in the family. So if you look back in the 40s and 50s, you'd find very similar watches in the Clinton line, in the Marathon line, right? Because we were all, the brothers were all working together. Sadly, my grandfather died before I was born, so I never knew him. So I'm relating the stories as I heard them from my father.
Sure.
But it was really, it was quite interesting that, everybody ended up with their own business in different places, but they all cooperated with each other, helped each other. And Marathon and I, my cousin Mitchell Wein, we pronounce our last names differently. I love him dearly. We still help each other. In fact, our Model 1, which is our flagship relaunched model after turning a century old, the final assembly is done in the Marathon factory. So the family tradition continues.
Yeah, no. And now something super cool is, so you guys are based in Chicago. In the middle of that period, I think it was 1922. That's when Grandpa did Clinton. And you guys kind of like decided to set up shop on the west side of Chicago. Is that?
Well, actually, no. Actually, originally, I think we were at 29 East Madison. The reason I know that, because by the time I was born, our factory had moved to the south side of Chicago, 1104 South Wabash. But the reason that I know it was 29 East Madison, because I never really discussed that earliest, history with my father, is that I know the story behind how my grandfather acquired Hampden, which is an interesting and kind of a sad story. So Hampden's background, the brand, the company goes back to 1877. And there were actually some antecedents before that. So there were 2 or 3 name changes before Hampden got established. And got established in Springfield, Massachusetts in 1877, and about a decade later moved to Akron, Ohio. Not Akron, I'm sorry, Canton, Ohio. So they got into trouble in the 20s, and the assets, got reorganized. So their factory got shipped to Russia, and actually became the founding of it actually got shipped to the Soviet Union and was the founding of the Soviet watch industry. And then the brand got acquired by a guy named Mannheimer, and then Adler. Long way of getting back to 29 East Madison. So my grandfather, and at the time my father, were in this building, Clinton Watch Company, and a couple of floors above them was Hampden Watch Company. And Adler jumped out of the window and committed suicide in 1958. I saw the newspaper clipping, and he hit a delivery truck and went through the roof of the truck. It was terrible. But his widow asked my grandfather to buy the company, and that's how we acquired Hampden.
That's crazy. It's a crazy story,
isn't it?
Something too that most people don't think about is like, if you think, and obviously I had to do a ton of research before he came on. In the 20s and 30s, like that was like the hub of American watchmaking. Like you had Elgin, you had Illinois, there was some case manufacturers, there was some mail order watch companies at the time. So maybe you've heard stories through the family, but what is being based in Chicago meant to a brand like yours?
That's actually a great question. So it turns out that Chicago was a catalog hub around the turn of the century. That's why you had so many major catalogs here. You had Montgomery Ward, which was a catalog. You had Sears, which was a catalog. In fact, my grandfather's first 3 customers were Montgomery Ward, Alden, and Spiegel. all catalog accounts. Of course, we were, Chicago was a centralized hub for shipping around the country. And so we always, I think, were stronger in catalog and direct mail than we were at retail. We absolutely sold at retail, in greater and lesser amounts throughout this entire period. But catalog and direct mail was always a focus of ours because we were in Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great place to be, especially in America. Something that I've heard you guys describe is Hampden as being, a 103-year-old Chicago story of craftsmanship, design, reinvention. What does it mean to carry that story forward?
It's interesting because Danny and I have debated about whether, most watch brands brag about the brand's age, right? And so then, Danny and I had a discussion. Do we say since 1877 or do we say since 1922, right? I said to him, well, listen, we're 100 years old, and I think we're the oldest watch company in the country. That's enough bragging rights. We don't need to pad it, right?
Yeah. And I'm assuming too, like, you guys have been family owned and operated this entire period, the entire history of the brand. So I'm assuming like that's a part of the strategy. That's part of the roadmap. Like, you're going to hand it down through your son, and then hopefully your son's son and son's son, and so on and so forth, and keep the legacy forward.
So first of all, my father pressured me greatly to join the family business. My undergraduate degree was computer engineering. Okay, and when I graduated, I moved to Silicon Valley, right? I was living in Sunnyvale, working in Palo Alto. Right major, right place, right time, 1985, okay? I'm sorry, 1984. It would have been a really interesting career path. But my mother tells me the first time that they visited me in California, my father came home very depressed. He said, "Joe's never coming home." So he eventually, he made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and I moved back to Chicago to join the family business. A little detour. I had to do a couple of months of officer basic at Fort Gordon, Georgia, because I was in the Army Reserves. I was so young and stupid back then. I didn't even know that they played golf in Augusta.
Did you have to put the same pressure on Dan, your son, to join the family business, or did it just...
No? And he was a different kind of guy. I was more compliant. He would have never been forced. COVID happens, right? And I'm thinking to myself, it's the end of the world. Our business is over. Everything, shutting down. It felt really terrible. But then, everybody's at home, and part of our business, a big chunk of our business is online. And so and we also manufacture jewelry. And so people started ordering. They're sitting at home with nothing to do, and they're going online and ordering. So, we get back into business. Then I realized, oh my God, we're approaching our 100th anniversary. We've got to do something, right? Because ever since selling Benrus, for the last 25 years, we've only been making private label watches, right? We've never stopped in 103 years. We've never stopped assembling watches in Chicago. And unions want to buy. For most of that history, nobody cared whether we were whether we were made in the US or not. But unions always cared, and unions give gifts to their union members. And so it's not a very big business, but it's a niche that not a lot of people compete in. So we were making union-made watches for union customers. And that's basically what we did since selling Benrus until, we realized, oh my God, we're almost a century old, and let's relaunch this. And that's when I started having the discussions with Danny. And Danny's background is marketing and PR, and he's a, wonderful. He didn't know the watch business, but he's been learning. So that's been really gratifying.
That's great.
I worked with my father, and now I'm working with my son.
That's great. That's a great place to be in. Are you guys still in the same walls that you've been in the whole time, or have you guys?
No.
Nah.
So we again, we started at 29 East Madison, and then we moved to the South Side. And then, when I joined the business, we were on the near South Side in Chicago, South Loop. And my father had acquired Benrus at that point, and our business was growing. And one day my father said to me, Joe, you don't see cars on blocks in front of the street anymore, and they're opening up a movie theater down the street. This is no longer a manufacturing neighborhood. We need to find ourselves a new crappy neighborhood. And so we bought the building we're in now, which is an old, renovated brick and timber factory building, where we moved, and we needed all this space for Benrus, because we were, at one point we were just one of our accounts, we were replenishing 2,500 Walmart stores every week.
It's crazy.
And it was interesting the way they did it, because EDI at that point had already started, and we master packed these things so that there was a little, plastic bag with for each store that needed replenishing. And then they just open up the big carton and throw these things on a conveyor belt, and they do what they did. So
that's so cool. It's such a cool story. Now bringing Hampden like full circle, it seems like you guys are really focused on not only creating brand awareness, but building timepieces that preserve the history of the brand, cementing the future of the brand. And it seems that you guys have really leaned into storytelling. How do you feel like that is a part of the ethos of the brand?
Oh, my earliest watch memory was I was a kid, and kids poke around in their parents' stuff. And I opened a drawer and found an old watch of my father's that had an engraving on the back with his initials and a number. Well, I recognized his initials, but I didn't recognize the number. And so I asked him about it, and he said, well, that's my Army serial number, and your grandfather gave me this watch before I shipped off to Europe in World War II. He served in Patton's Third Army in the 8th Armored Division. Clinton watch, of course.
Yeah.
And I never forgot how that made me feel, right? Knowing it was a crappy beat-up watch. It wasn't a special watch, but knowing the story and seeing the engraving, the watch went from being worthless to being priceless. And so I told Danny that when we were discussing this, the relaunch to the consumers of the Hampden brand, that I wanted to make watches that made other people feel the way I remembered that watch had made me feel. And that's why we're so focused on engraving, and it's a different level of engraving than many watches. Most watches can have an engraved case back, but what we're doing is something quite different. And it's because I want to connect people to their stories. I mean, I would rather make a watch that is precious than a watch that is valuable.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, it somehow makes perfect sense.
And as you can tell, I like stories.
Super curious. I mean, I'm sure you've probably been trying to go back, and you guys have been probably trying to go back and build your archive, right? Is that? Is that a priority to you at this point?
Yes, it's interesting because we've always had a lot of watches from our collection, and when we were planning our relaunch party this summer, we in our building, I decided I wanted to create 10 different display cases showing that collection. And then I took half the watches out because I realized I didn't want to display watches. I wanted to tell stories. So the way that I organized things was in a storytelling way. So for example, if I was, a case talking about Hampden's early history, it showed the transition between, a key wound lever set watch showing the movement, and then a keyless watch, but still lever set, and then and showing the transition between pocket watches and wrist watches. If I was doing a case that was describing our different brands, I would show, here is a Douglas watch and here is a Clinton watch, same watch, different brands, sold through different catalogs, I assume, because some of this happened before, okay, or we'd have a Hampden and a Clinton that were the same model, but different brands selling through different channels of distribution. And of course, one of my favorite cases was when I started putting together some of my father's patents and innovations. And I discovered actually something that I hadn't really realized. My father was always obsessed with time and with calendars and being able to figure out future days of the week. And it turns out that most of his patents were actually connected with that. So, for example, one of his early patents, actually not his earliest, I discovered, I was doing research before our launch, I discovered he had written a patent in Switzerland in French in 1968, which I still don't understand. But anyway, but he invented and patented basically a diver's watch, but the bezel has an opening in it, and you can adjust the month to appear on the bezel. Okay, and he called that a month minder. And then he invented another patent, which he called the Perpetua, which actually had three. Here, you know what?
I was about to say, I hope you have some of these with us.
Yes. Okay. So here, and it has three crowns, and it's because you have two rings, and I know that most people are listening to this, so I'll try and describe it.
Yeah.
You have two rings inside the bezel, one of which shows the day of the week, and one of which shows the date of the month. And if you adjust one ring against the other ring, you can then see which day of the week you have during any month. I'm sorry, during any date. So you can figure out, if it's the 6th of October. What day of the week is the 29th of October, right? Because you just adjust it once a month. And so these were actually, I guess, case complications, right? They weren't movement complications, but they were both case complications, which now that I think about it is a little weird to me because our case cap is also a case complication, isn't it?
Makes sense. It's a cool. People who are listening, you're going to have to go to YouTube to see these watches. So you have more there, don't you? You have a couple other pieces tucked away, don't you?
So this was probably the culmination of my father's obsession with this. So and this was this I don't think was his invention, because I never found a patent for it. But this he sold under both the Nuvex and Clinton brands, and this actually lets you figure out the day of the week for any date in a 23-year period.
That's so cool.
And of course, all of this was done. These were rings underneath the dial, so activated by by an extra crown. So this was also a case complication. So I guess that's a family tradition.
That is such a cool. I love those old watch ads. I don't know what it is about them. They just like take me in a time machine, and I like get myself in the place of what somebody flipping through a magazine would see and how that would impact them. It's just such a cool thing to me.
You want to see another fun one?
Please share.
Okay, so actually, this may be the best promotion that Clinton ever did. It was a watch, divers watches, so water resistant they come packed in water. Okay, so can you see that?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay. And
I've seen those before.
Have you?
The Wolbrook one, I think it was on the other page, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, where they sold them in little like water boxes or whatever.
Yes, actually, my father used to call them urine jars. But as a matter of fact, one of my early experiences working in the factory was working on the water packing line.
Wow.
I was, working for a guy named Ramon Zavaios. I still remember. I'm not sure how helpful I was because I was pretty young. I was probably 10 or 11. I was working in this,
sure,
during summer vacation. It's possible that actually it was half babysitting and half, he just wanted to keep me out of trouble. But it turns out that it wasn't as easy as you think doing a water pack watch, because if the watch is sitting for several months on the shelf before it ships, you can grow algae, so you need an algicide. Well, the watch might ship during winter, so you need an antifreeze. But what happens if somebody drinks the water? So it had to be human safe. So it was a little complicated. And my father was telling me about this whole process while they were trying to develop this product. I still remember once somebody sent a watch back to our service department, and he said, I faithfully put the watch back in water every night.
Put it back to where it came from.
So he apparently thought it was like a fish and it lived in water.
That's how it's powered, hydro powered.
So
you took over the brand in 2002, I believe, after the passing of your dad.
Yes.
How did that transition influence your approach to now what you define as leadership and what you look at now as legacy?
Well, my father left pretty big shoes to fill. And I was very much driven by his ethical framework, right? Intensely loyal to our people. I grew up seeing that there were many, many employees who had been with us for 20, 30, 40 years. As a matter of fact, I remember the longest employee that we had started working for my grandfather in 1954, Josephine Krispecki. So she worked for my actually, she said to me, I worked for your grandfather, I worked for your father, and I worked for you. I'm not working for your son. But she finally retired in, I think, 2008 or 9. But
wow.
It was that kind of a family business. It was a family business that was also a family.
Wow. That's so crazy. So this is going to be a controversial one, but I'm sure
Yeah.
you're going to have a lot to talk about when it comes to this. Um, you and your family's brand and the entire portfolio were one of the first brands to really stand behind your product and say, we offer a lifetime guarantee on every single watch sold. Do you still think that that can exist in today's like fast consumer market?
I don't. Uh,
Yeah.
but growing up, yes, Clinton watches were guaranteed for life. And I still remember, so I had already joined the business. So this was probably around 1990. And somebody sent a watch back in to the service department that had been sold in my grandfather's era. And so the service manager brought it to me, and I brought it to my father, and I was so excited. If you haven't figured out yet, I'm a pretty sentimental guy, right?
Right.
So I'm like, Dad, look at this. I can't believe. And he sent it in, of course, for, guaranteed for life service, right? And so I'm like, Dad, this is incredible. And he sent a long letter, right? I've worn this watch every day for the last, I don't know, 40, 50 years. I don't remember the details. And I said, Dad, isn't this incredible? And so my father, he looked at the watch, he read the letter, and he said, why don't you write him back and say, if all of our customers were like you, we'd be out of business. Buy a new watch. I, of course, didn't do that. But he was pulling my leg because he saw how excited I was.
Yeah. That's so cool. I mean, that's the type of stuff that really kind of is like fuel for you, I'm assuming today, right? So working with your dad and now working along with your son, like how has that transitioned from being something aspirational, like working with your dad and learning from him? Like, how do you like step into those shoes and how do you fill those shoes and how do you teach Daniel, how do you pass along those family
Yeah, no,
values,
it's a great question. So, by all accounts, my father had a difficult relationship with his father in business,
Hmm.
and and so that I think informed the way that my father worked with me. He gave me, an area of responsibility, and he gave me a lot more freedom, which I am doing with Danny because that seemed to work a little better. But my father used to say to me, that his father, because my father was very analytic, and my grandfather was more emotional and instinct driven, and so he said, that my grandfather was always right for the wrong reasons, because my father would argue with him about things, and then it would turn out my grandfather was right, but the reasons that he gave didn't make sense to my father. So.
Yeah.
But having, I think, in a multi-generational family business, when somebody comes in, you need to give them an area where they have expertise, where they can kind of build their position, also with the rest of the team, right? Because it's always difficult coming in to a business where the boss is your father, right? Because the
Yeah.
question is, do you have any competence, or are you simply a deadbeat who got a job? And of course, when I came into the business, the easy and first responsibility for me was the IT department, because I was a computer engineer.
Yeah.
And then my father, started teaching me how to sell, and he gave me a couple of accounts. So I started selling and being responsible for that as well. So, but it started out with an area of my core competency. So Danny's actually had an interesting career before he has started. He has now started in the company, a mature man. He's not a kid, right?
Right.
But he worked in a large PR firm in Washington, D.C., he worked for Facebook for a while. He ran a nonprofit. So he has a background that and his marketing and PR and is an area of his natural expertise. And as an engineer, of course, the technical side of watches where I naturally fit in. So I think we're a pretty good team.
Yeah. Curious too about, I mean, obviously there's going to be values that you try if you haven't already transferred over to your son, but what type of values do you hope that, Danny will carry as he continues to push the next chapter? Obviously your tenure's not over, right? But
well, we'll see how, when is he going to kick me out? Hopefully not yet.
No, it's something I also found very interesting. And let's talk about, your early days in like the 90s. It was my understanding that you were responsible for like a production overhaul. Did I understand that correctly? Where you dramatically reduced the lead times from like 24 days to 5. Like, how did you even fathom that?
Okay. So, again, a lot of our customer base was at the time catalog and direct mail, which of course has now transitioned to the internet, right? And back then, a big item was personalized watches. These are watches
Right.
with people's names printed on the dial. And the way we used to manufacture them for decades was we would take a printing plate and put it up and a steel plate, put a resist on it, scratch through it with a pantograph, put it in acid. Now we've got a plate, and we'd use a pad printer manually to print on the dial, and then we'd assemble the watch. And we were making, and we had competitors at the time, and it took us 21 to 24 days typically. You could do any watch in one day, but by the time you were done with the whole cycle in a production, it was 3 weeks. And so one of my earliest innovations, which actually I learned something about patents at the time because I didn't apply for the patent in time. But we used lasers to engrave on the dial. And that allowed us to dramatically reduce the cycle time. So we went from 21 to 24 days down to 5 days, and we actually had an internal name for it, GRD, Guaranteed Rapid Delivery. And two things happened after we launched that. The first is that our competition disappeared because nobody else could compete with that. And the second was our return rate dropped by 2/3.
Wow.
And so that was that kind of got me. And at the time, I was going through my MBA, and it was the era. Got my MBA at the University of Chicago, and it was the era of continuous improvement and the Baldrige Award and all that sort of stuff. So the idea of taking processes and improving them was kind of embedded in my brain. So I started looking for ways to do that, and that was probably my first invention, even though it wasn't patented. Later, I patented a method for engraving casting waxes for making personalized jewelry. As we're talking about this, personalization in one form or another has been a part of my personal interest since I have been in business. And so now, all the way back to now, where we're trying to, make engraved case backs that are really a step above what anybody else is doing. And it's personalization. It's all about trying to connect people to their stories and making their watch precious to them for emotional reasons. Most brands, not just watch brands, but all brands are about the brand. if you wear this brand, here's what it says about you, right?
Totally.
I'm trying to make our watches about the wearer.
That's awesome. I'm assuming that's going to be a perfect segue right into the case cap, right? So tell people who don't know what the case cap is and how special it is.
So I'll tell you what the case cap is, but first I'll tell you how we got there, right? So
Please.
we're working on Zoom during COVID. Before COVID, I had never used Zoom, and I knew that I'd wanted to try and work on this project to see if we could relaunch the Hampden brand. So I called a friend of mine, Alan Grunwald, who used to own Bel Air Watch, and we both owned factories together in the U.S. Virgin Islands. So I got to know him pretty well, and so I asked him, and he had retired. I asked him, you want to work on this for me, and with me, and so we had a designer overseas, and Alan in New York, and two of us in Chicago, and another friend who at the time lived in Nashville, who was a watch collector, and we started working on these on the Model 1, and I was loving the direction it was going, but I had a dilemma because I wanted to use Swiss movements, so it's beautiful movements. I wanted to be able to see the movement,
Right.
but I also wanted to have engravings because that's kind of again. What really drives me is making these special things for people. Well, that's a bit of a dilemma. Like you can either have an exhibition back, or you can have an engraved case back. Pick one. Can't do both. And so that stumped us for about a year, and I just kept chewing on it, and I wasn't satisfied with going in either direction. And so then I had an idea. And I'll try and show it here, but I'll also describe it because I know that most people won't be watching this.
We're gonna have to ask them to come to YouTube to see all this awesomeness.
So basically, now technically this is the case back, right? So this is the thing that protects the movement, and you can see that there is a raised. Where the sapphire glass is a little bit raised, and it's an oval, right? And it has an undercut. And the case cap also has an oval shape with an undercut. And because of the eccentric shape, if you put the case cap on the case and then turn it 30 degrees, it holds it in place. And of course, we put a couple of capsiballs so that and some dimples so that it clicks. It's a very satisfying click. And so you can wear it. You know what? Silly me. We actually have an open ring so that you can wear it as an exhibition back. And then you have the engraved case back. So this watch actually comes with both. And the watch, we actually have a design concierge so that if you don't know what engraving you want, you just kind of explain vaguely what the event or the gift or whatever, or what the personal thing you want engraved for yourself. And we have a designer who will give you some design ideas, and then you'll work with her to figure it out. But this way you can wear it both ways. And in fact, if you love the watch, because it's a beautiful watch, and I'll show you a little more about that in a minute. If you love the watch and you don't know what you want engraved, buy the watch, wear it with the open ring, the exhibition back, and you can buy the engraving later, right? Or I mean, it's included, but you can just order the engraving later and have it shipped to you. So this actually, I don't know whether you can see it, but so this shows a globe, and around the globe is around the circumference. It says Cape Town, New York, Chicago, Nashville, and Chicago. So this is the engraving that I gave to the 5 people in our relaunch team.
Wow.
So
cool.
So we eat our own cooking, right? And when Danny joined the business, I made him a watch with around the circumference. It said Hyman 1922, Irving 1949, Joseph 1985, Daniel 2023. Congratulations on being 4th generation in our family business. May you go from strength to strength. Love, Dad. And I don't think he understood why I was so focused on this kind of sentimental personalization until I gave him that watch, because it became very, very precious to him. Even though, millennials generally don't wear watches, right? It's funny, because everybody's got their time in their pocket. We've gone from pocket watch to pocket watch in 125 years.
That's so funny. Speaking of time in the pocket, Hampden used the engraving technology. My understanding that you used your engraving technology and licensed that to Apple for the customization of iPods, iPads, etc.
It was actually after the iPod era. So,
Okay.
So again, because I was always interested, I was a technology guy. And so we developed a patent for simulating dynamic imaging of an engraving online for e-commerce. And so we patented this. So at some point, Apple started offering engravings on iPads, and you would type your name or the message or whatever, and it would appear on the image of the iPad.
Yeah.
So I had my attorney, send them a letter and say, we have this patent. They have a whole department for this. It didn't phase them at all, right? And so he looks at it and he says, yeah. And he said, well, listen, the limit of my authority to make a deal is $50,000. If it's more than that, we send it to outside counsel. So my attorney said, it's funny you're saying that, we're asking 49.
Wow.
So listen, I've probably spent more money on patents than, most of the patents did not make money, right? It's expensive to do, and not all of them work out. So that one, we made a little money on it. And of course we used it. But the bragging rights are kind of fun.
Kept the lights on for a little bit. Curious about, so your brand has so much history, heritage, innovation. We've already talked about it. You've led the company through multiple reinvention periods, is my understanding. Curious about your approach to how do you decide to innovate versus preserve, family tradition? Yeah, that's going to be a challenging one, I'm sure.
I have an innovation brain, and I'm never satisfied. There isn't a watch we've ever made. I don't know whether that's literally true, but most of the things that we've done, I could find some way to improve it if I put my mind to it. So innovation has always been part of the way that I think about things. But of course, the biggest innovation that I think is our focus now is the innovation about our direction to create these connections between people and their watches, right? The case cap is a wonderful idea, and it's the kind of invention that once you see it, it's like, oh, that's obvious, right? Those are the best kinds of inventions that once you understand how it works, it's obvious to you. But it's just the mechanism, right? The real goal is this sentimental piece, right?
Yeah.
So the technological innovation is really just serving the direction.
Something that was super cool and super nerdy is, you probably don't know this about me, but I am from North Carolina. What also happened, I think you probably know exactly where I'm going with this. What also happened in North Carolina was the Wright brothers, first in flight, and Kitty Hawk. And as I started doing research for this, I learned that the Wright brothers had a Hampden watch on them. So therefore, your watch was the first ever watch in flight.
You know, it's funny. I only learned that. So we were at the Worn and Wound show in New York just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And two brothers, Gabe Silverstein and his brother from Los Angeles, came up to the booth and they said, you know, have you ever been to the Air and Space Museum? I said, yes. I said, well, we were there a couple of days ago, and they have a, you know, at the Wright Brothers exhibit, and there's a Hampden watch on display at the Smithsonian, which I didn't know, which is kind of crazy. I mean, my goal is not to be a historian, right?
Sure.
Now, I knew that there was a Hampden watch in the Smithsonian Permanent Collection of Early American Watches, but I didn't know about this connection with the Wright brothers, right? So it was in, I think, Wilbur Wright's pocket on the first flight, or on the first, when they were doing their first manned flight. And keep in mind, at the time, Hampden Watch Company was in Canton, Ohio. And I think, weren't the Wright brothers from Ohio? I think they were. Wasn't their bicycle shop? Their bicycle shop might have been in Ohio. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I know that they just chose the Kitty Hawk because of the naturally sloping dunes, and they could run off one and get a nice little hang time.
So actually, that's two unexpected brushes with history. Actually, I have one more unexpected story. Hampden. I started dating my now wife, right? She's my girlfriend, and I fly to Los Angeles where she lives, and we were going to some event. I don't remember what it was, and she said, I think I'm going to wear my mother's cocktail watch that she got for her Sweet 16. It was a little 5.5 line cocktail watch, and so she handed me the watch. And she went to take a shower, and I can't read the name on the watch. It's so tiny, and I don't have 20-year-old eyes anymore. So I pull out my loop and I look, and it's a Hampden watch that her mother got for her Sweet 16. So I said to her, well, now you have to marry me.
Yeah, there you go. Talk about persuasive. Let's transition. And so you've got two pretty important milestones, 2025 and 2026. 2025, actually, I think next month, right? Or December. Sorry, December. You guys are doing like a classroom. Did I understand that correctly? You guys are going to be doing a hands-on experience where people can assemble their own mechanical watches.
Yes. So, and I've been working on it all year. I really wanted to create an experience that lets people assemble their own movement and then assemble their own watch. So we chose, the old Unitas 6497 family of watches. We chose the 6498 variant, which has the small second hand at 6 rather than at 9. So we've developed this experience. So you come in, and we do half an hour on how mechanical movements work, because I'm not assuming that everybody who comes to have this experience is a watch nerd, right?
Sure.
And then together we disassemble a Swiss mechanical movement, and then we reassemble the movement, and then we add the dial and the hands and the casing ring, case the watch, time the watch, water test the watch, and you go home with a Swiss watch that you assembled from scratch. I suppose this is just another way of trying to connect people to their watches, right? Now, this watch, of course, is a manual wind watch, and it's a very big movement. That's why we picked the movement. It's a movement everybody learns on, right?
Yeah.
Even though, so we clearly weren't going to put a case cap on it, because if you assembled this movement, you want to be able to see the movement, right?
Yeah.
But we are going to engrave the ratchet wheel with your initials and the year.
That's so cool. It's also something that's really kind of stuck out to me just spending time with you. But you've seen the evolution of like people have went away from craftsmanship and authenticity and in a product powered market. You wet your feet like during that period where craftsmanship and authenticity were everything to be like a strategic advantage, right? And now we're seeing fast fashion, disposable products, disposable laptops, technology that is obsolete within a year. And something that you at your leadership now have seen this come full circle back to people appreciating craftsmanship, authenticity. Like, what has that been like for you just to kind of like see this whole full circle moment?
When I was growing up, and so certainly I was a teenager in the 70s, so I have memories from the 60s, but certainly in the 70s, we were in the mechanical watch business, and it was a business of detail and precision, and it always interested me, right? And as things transitioned to quartz, and it appeared that the mechanical industry, the mechanical watch business, was over forever. I mean, it was a very discouraging time.
Right.
And watches got so many watches. I mean, got cheap, and they were fashion, and it was a different business, and it became a less interesting business to me. And I cannot tell you how gratified I am that there has been a resurgence of interest in mechanical watches and fine watches. And there was a time when I thought that it was never, this passion was never going to come back, because watches are no longer instruments for timekeeping anymore. You've got your time in your pocket.
Right.
So watches have to be something else, right? And so for a period of time, they were fashion, and now people are appreciating the craftsmanship again. So it's really been an inspiration for me that we've come back to this place.
It's amazing. I want to talk to let's see if we can get a little bit more out of you as an entrepreneur, right? We've talked about the brand, we've talked about the heritage, we've talked about the history, talked about the family, but something that we haven't really talked about is your entrepreneurial activities, leadership. And this is probably going to be one of the harder questions I ask, but as a CEO now, what's one of the hardest decisions that you've had to make, and what did you learn from it?
It's a great question. The reality is that you always learn more from your failures than your successes, right? If you do something and you're successful, then I plan to do X, and X happened, and so boy, aren't I really smart, right? Failures force you to then check your priors. Like, what did I assume? What was different than my assumptions? All that. And probably the hardest thing that we ever did. So we had a jewelry manufacturing business that was much bigger than our watch business after we sold Benrus. Benrus was always the bigger part of the business, and then we sold Benrus, and then the jewelry business grew. And the financial crisis in 2008 was devastating for our industry. And I was always, because we are, we have our people are so loyal to us, and we are so loyal to our people. We were very, very slow to make those painful downsizing decisions. So the same sentimental qualities in me that are driving the focus of our brand, also I discovered made me slower to make some decisions during this crisis period than I should have made. So,
Yeah, it's a hard one.
Old too soon and wise too late, right?
I'm sure your storytelling and your whole ideals and values behind personalization, we see them in your products, but I'm sure you incorporate those into your leadership philosophy. Is that accurate?
Well, I care about people, right? And my father cared about people. I remember at my father's funeral, I don't know how I got through it. Even now, it makes me tear up. But I delivered his eulogy, and one of the things I said was, my father never had much time for God. He was always too busy with people. So absolutely, I've forgotten your question now, because you put me in an emotional place. What did you ask?
I asked how storytelling and personalization reflects in your leadership philosophy.
Yeah. I try to lead by creating a team that feels like a family. I care about, we have a wonderfully loyal people who've worked for us for a very long time, and we have tried to show loyalty back. And so, that I think is a big piece of my leadership style. Yeah.
Growing up in a family who always was innovating time, pushing time, what have you learned about patience, time, craftsmanship, not only in business, but in life and relationships, from being brought up by a whole family in horology?
Well, my father was always obsessed with time, right? He always felt as if time was too short. I don't know whether it's because of his experiences in the war, but my mother once told us a story about how my father had said, every morning I get dressed and I have to sit down on the bed to tie my shoes, and then I go to the kitchen and I have to sit down again to eat cereal. I just realized if I don't tie my shoes till I get to the kitchen, I only have to sit down once. So he was always so focused with efficiency. I mean, and my mother told these stories to remind us all that he was a bit nuts, right? Once he woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning and he started getting dressed on a Sunday morning, right? And my mother asked, "Where are you going?" He said, "I don't know, but I'm late already." So this was just, so time and efficiency was just part of my father's DNA. And so I guess that's the way I grew up. I mean, it was a focus on time that went way beyond the fact that we were in the watch business.
That's so cool. and this is let's talk a little bit about the future now. So if we could sit down 10 years from now, what would you hope has changed the most about the Hampden brand?
So I hope that that we are known as the watch that you wear or that you give when you're trying to commemorate something meaningful for yourself or for someone else. So that's not really a change. That's a direction that I feel we're committed to. Now, maybe we will relaunch some of our historical watches. That would be tons of fun.
Yeah.
I think we might even want to start assembling some watches in Chicago, even though probably not the Hampden brand, might be the Clinton brand, because when we first started working on this project, I really didn't know whether we is the most interesting thing about us that we're a 100-year-old brand, or that we've been assembling watches continuously in Chicago for 100 years. So I thought maybe we'll make Swiss movements, but assembled in Chicago. And when my cousin Mitchell from Marathon saw our case cap patent, he said, "No, Joe, this has to be Swiss made because this has legs internationally. If you ever want to market internationally, it's going to have a lot more strength if it's Swiss made." And so that kind of guided our direction. And I think he was absolutely right. I think the case cap is something, one of the things about engraving a watch, if you take most watches have a screw back, right? And so even if you engrave the watch already assembled and it's straight, the first time you open up that case to repair the movement, change the battery, whatever, when you reclose that case back, it's never going to be aligned again forever. So the case cap, of course, gives us this ability to stay perfectly aligned, because it always bugged me when I saw engravings that were cockeyed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So all of our watches, you'll notice, even the models 2, 3, and 4, and I don't, it's too early to say whether our focus is going to be Swiss quartz or Swiss mechanical. It's probably going to remain both, because not every event, not every person wants to spend Swiss prices, but every person has something that they care about. So I think we do want to have a less costly quartz line, but the models 2, 3, and 4 all have use small screws to attach the back so that it stays aligned. And it's more expensive and more of a pain to assemble, right? But Cartier, lots of people do it. But for us, the benefit is that it allows our engraving to remain always exactly correct.
I think that's a great strategy too, to let people decide like how much they invest into your brand, into their products. I've always been a fan of that. Super curious, and you might be the only person that I could probably ask this question to and actually get an answer from somebody who knows what the hell they're talking about. But what role?
That's a bad setup. I'm in trouble.
No, I don't think so. What role do you see American watchmaking playing in the global industry over the next century or sooner?
Well, the number of American micro brands that have exploded in the market is phenomenal. If you're asking what is the likelihood that we're going to build a mechanical watch industry comparable to the Swiss, I think not much chance. Our industry was always an industry of specialties, right? You had a movement manufacturer, you had a dial manufacturer, you had and when I still remember when I was my first trip to Basel with my father, we'd walk around and we buy our hands from this company in France, and Bach and Schoop always made the best dials, but they're too expensive for us now. And we'd walk around, but it was all specialties, and that is the way that an industry like the watch industry works. I mean, you have some houses now that have the financial power to do everything, but that's very rare, And we were never, we were watch assemblers, right? We're a regular company that was in the watch business, so we never had, we were never going to be designing our own movements or manufacturing our own dials or hands. So I don't think that some of those things are ever going to come in consequence, right? You may have somebody, there are people who are finding ways to manufacture movements here, but it's not going to be at scale. So they're going to be specialty items. But I think that what you are going to have, and what you're already seeing, is a resurgence of American watchmaking, of the sort that Clinton and Hampden and Wolbrook and Douglas and all of these other brands were in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, right? Those companies, by and large, were not manufacturing their components. They were sourcing, they were designing and sourcing and assembling. And so that clearly is coming back. And so we may be in a period where we were 50 and 60 years ago. And how fun is that?
So cool. So cool. Super curious. And if your grandfather Hyman or your father Irving could see the Hampden brand today and what you've done, what do you think they'd be the most proud of?
I think they would both be gratified by a few things. First, that we're staying, we're working with our cousin, just like has been going on for multiple generations. I think they would both be gratified by the fact that Danny has now come into the business. I think they would both be. I don't know whether my grandfather had ever written any patents. I never heard of any and never found any. My father wrote several, and I think he would be gratified by the fact that I have made this little innovation. And weirdly, it's a case complication, just like he always did, even though I am not obsessed with calendars and figuring out, what day of the week a particular date is in 6 months. I just look at my calendar on my laptop. He didn't have that in the 1970s. So, but the combination, I think it would be a mixture of the family piece, right? Cousin Mitchell, son Danny, and the fact that we're continuing the tradition of making fine watches, so I wish they were both here to talk to them.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I'm sure they know exactly what you're doing right now. Final question. When you think about Hampden, in the next 100 years, placing the brand with your son, Daniel, what story do you hope the brand will still continue to tell?
I hope that, the great grandchild of somebody who has gotten a Hampden watch or worn a Hampden watch with an engraving on the back is holding that watch as something precious because of the family story that it tells for them. So I'm hoping that what we're making for people are legacies that are going to be precious because of what they mean, to their children and to their grandchildren. My grandfather wore this watch, and he got it on his wedding day, and here's what his father had written him, that sort of thing. So if 100 years from now, we're still around, I'm hoping that we're still making watches that connect to people that way, and that the watches that we're making today are still being held as precious things for in the families that have them.
So amazing. So amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. I know this was your first podcast, and I told you that I'd be a total easy interview. Thank you so much for coming on, spending some time with us, showing us the brand from your perspective. Listeners out there, I would totally encourage you to go to the Hampden website. They have some great models, great products, and you can clearly see that there's passion at the brand. And that's the most rewarding part about being in the watch industry, or at least having conversations like this, to still see that passion lives at a lot of these watch brands. It clearly lives there with you. And I'm so glad that we got to spend, so much time talking about the story and learning about the brand. I think was freaking amazing.
Thank you, Blake. First of all, this was my first podcast. You're such a wonderful conversationalist. You really made it easy for me, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate the chance I really enjoyed this conversation. And you actually, your questions made me think about some things that I haven't thought about in a long time. And so, maybe that's an indication of how skillful you are as an interviewer. But I really had fun, and I thank you.
I need my own Sirius XM radio show if you guys are out there listening. But no, Joe, thank you so much for spending time with us. I can't wait. I think you guys are going to send me a watch so I can get hands on. I didn't have an opportunity to spend too much time with you in New York.
Work it out with Danny. We have to figure out what we're going to engrave on your case cap, right?
Wow. That's a big response. I need to think about that for quite a while before. I've never engraved one of my watches.
So it's interesting because when I started this, my conception was only that this was a gift item, right? This is, you're giving this like I gave to Danny or I gave to, and we started seeing people make self-purchases, and I didn't understand it. And Danny explained it to me. Anybody who has a tattoo knows why they have that tattoo. There is something, a phrase, a name, a person, a graphic, something that is meaningful to them. And so very often that is a self-purchase, and it is the watch equivalent of a tattoo for somebody who is buying it for themselves. Do you have any tattoos?
No.
Okay. Well, maybe you can have a watch tattoo.
Yeah. Now that we've had this conversation, this really makes an emotional moment for me. I've talked before about like my relationship with my father and how my dad passed away about a year ago, and I got his watch. It was a Breitling, and my dad wore that watch every single day. But it would have been so much cooler if it was engraved to him. And now I owned it. Because, I know that sounds so weird to say.
It doesn't.
I know.
Not to me.
I know it.
Not to me, because
Yeah.
this is the way I'm wired, right? And we've had people. So we had a guy who bought 6 watches, one for him and one for his 5 brothers, and on each of them he engraved a saying from their father, right? So to me, the fact that you're wearing your father's watch and that it's precious to you makes complete sense. And, you know, how amazing, how much even more powerful would it have been if, you know, it had been engraved as a gift when he got married or when he, you know, graduated college or God knows what. So,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, we're the same. We're the
Yeah.
same.
No, shamefully, the only way to link it to him is one that I know that he wore it, right? And the serial number when he registered it to as a Breitling, you know, Breitling knows that he purchased it, or the retailer. But if somehow, heaven forbid, some way it does not continue to stay in the family, then nobody else will ever know that it was his.
My apologies, Blake, for not having invented and relaunched this several years ago so that he could have had one of our Hampden watches with an engraving for you to have now.
No, it makes it particularly important for, you know, my family, right? You know,
Yeah.
to not let that happen to some of my timepieces. So,
Yeah.
Joe, thank you so much. I don't want to take any more of your time. This was an
Thank
hour
you.
and a half of amazingness.
Oh my God, seriously?
Yeah,
Oh, that's crazy.
it flies, right? It flies.
Nobody's going to listen to this whole thing.
I bet you they will. I bet you they will. I promise they
Blake,
will.
thank you so much. This was a delight.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on, and we will talk very, very, very soon. Everybody, please go check out Joe Hampden Watch, and we are going to link them in our bio. And this is actually going to be coming out tomorrow. So this is one of our tightest turnaround podcasts yet. And what better brand to do it with Joe and the family story. So
Thanks
everybody,
so much.
please go check them out. And Joe, we will talk very soon.
Thanks.